should we go ahead and get started?
Sure.
All right. Can we, so I think we have a couple of different people on the call this time. Why don't we just go through and say hi, if that's okay?
Sure.
Anybody want to start? Just say who you are, and if you want to add anything, you certainly can. I'm Kirsten. I'm helping co-chair this committee with Andrea.
I'm Nicole Laura, and I'm School Library System Coordinator at Broome Tagabosies in Binghamton. I was last time on the call sort of there in spirit in my car, so I caught some of the meeting, but not all of it. I'm happy to join everyone today.
Awesome. Welcome, Nicole.
This is Ben Higgins, and I am a District Technology Integration Specialist at Springville Griffith Institute, located south of Buffalo, New York.
Awesome. Welcome back, Ben.
Hi, this is Sarah Farnan. I'm an ENL teacher at Greece Central School District at Athena High School, and I was unable to attend the last meeting. I had a dentist appointment, so I'm happy to be here today and excited to be on the committee.
Awesome. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
We have Natalia and Claudio, and then we have call-in user number 4, so I'm not sure who that is.
I think that might be Ben.
Is it? I see Ben is on
there.
Oh,
do you see Ben too? Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claudio Leon. I'm a school librarian for Passage Academy, District 79 School. We're in the South Bronx.
Awesome. Welcome, Claudio. And we have Natalia. You want to say hi, Natalia, if you're there? All right. So anybody that wants to jump in certainly can at any point. So are you able to access the Moodle and the agenda for today? Does everybody see? We have 4 items on the agenda, starting with just a quick housekeeping. If you're having any issues accessing it, let me know. The first thing we wanted to do is schedule another meeting in rapid succession if possible. You might have already heard that we've been asked to meet 3 or 4 times before the meeting on May 24th in Albany. So we're hoping to schedule at least 1 more meeting, possibly 2. If everybody could take a moment and just respond to that doodle poll that's linked, we can make that as expeditious as possible.
I saw the dates. I don't think I can make any of the dates selected, unfortunately.
So sorry about that, Claudio. I know Andrea's time is somewhat limited, both of us actually, in the next 2 weeks. For me, it's like the end of the semester and just such a crazy time at SUNY. So I apologize for that. And then we tried to keep it like either really early or in the afternoon. So there were some somewhat limited times.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I just figured let everybody know.
I appreciate that. Okay, so if everybody's able to do that at some point, that would be fabulous. And then let's pull up the agenda again in front of me. I've already lost it. Too many windows open. Okay. So one of the things we wanted to make sure to do today, and actually does somebody mind keeping a time, just sort of keeping us on? I allocated about 15 minutes for this discussion. If we don't take up that time, that's great. But would somebody mind just keeping us on that?
I can do that.
Awesome. Thanks. Is that Sarah?
Natalia.
Natalia. Thanks.
No problem.
Maybe just let us know when we have like 5 minutes left or so.
Yep. We're starting now.
So the expectations, I think, for the May 24th meeting are to make some sort of like a large recommendation or make a recommendation in the direction of something that we would then accomplish as a subcommittee. And Marianne, definitely jump in here if I'm getting any of this wrong. But the idea, I think, is to make some recommendations out on May 24th around what this committee could potentially do. And then whether or not we're going to, really connected to item number 4 on the agenda today, whether or not we're going to recommend that we develop some sort of framework or standards or utilize something that already exists. So some of this work is a little bit nebulous until we figure out what exactly we're doing, but I think that date is our first deadline to sort of make a general recommendation about what we're doing here.
Right, yeah, it doesn't have to be a, a full-blown report or anything, but, what the committee's, what you've got a consensus around the direction to move in, like you said. Is it reform or revolution? Do we recommend adapting something or starting from scratch or, et cetera? Yep.
Okay. So maybe that won't take 15 minutes, but I guess we can just keep that in the back of our minds as we continue the conversation today. Sort of what do we want to be, what do we want to be in that presentation, especially given the limited time that we've had to meet prior to that date.
Right.
Okay. So should we move on to defining digital literacy? Is that okay? We're so efficient. That's great. So Natalia, if you wouldn't mind keeping us on tabs with this section too, that would be awesome.
Okay.
I'm sure we can go over 25 minutes here if we need to. So one of the first things that we talked about recommending last week, and I'm not sure if that's something that we can just do as ETAC or if this is something that we do need to suggest on May 24th. So Marianne, do let us know this. But one of the things that came up was whether or not to change the committee name to digital literacy over technology literacy. And the consensus on the call last time was that we should move toward digital literacy, that it sort of encapsulates a little bit more, that it's not just about computer science, which sometimes technology literacy tends to relate a little bit more to, depending on who you're talking to. So one of the things we wanted to do today was come up with sort of our definition of digital literacy, if people are okay with going in that direction, as opposed to technology literacy. And I had agreed in the last call to put together some information about what's, how is digital literacy being defined. And my angle of things is always, from a teacher prep perspective, so do recognize, critique me, give feedback, if that's something that's not always helpful. But I basically went to the literature and took an excerpt of a little piece that I have recently submitted for publication that goes into a little bit of a summary around, like, what is the literature saying, the academic literature on digital literacy. So there's a linked piece there where I direct you to page 2. And then I linked a couple of other resources, and I'm sure you all know of other ones that we really should take a look at. But something from Iste, there is, a category of their blog posts that look at sort of media and literacy related, or digital and media literacy related topics. And then there was in my poking around a little bit, Common Sense has a little, like, what they call their backgrounder pieces on news and media literacy. And the thing that I gleaned from all of this is that there's no one definition. People are really defining this depending on what they're doing. So I'm going to shut up for a second and ask, just sort of as a process, should we take a couple of minutes and look over some of these? Should we suggest some other resources to add to this list and then use that to guide our conversation next time? What would you like to do in terms of talking about some of this? Because I realize you just got that information. You didn't have a chance to take a look at it before this call. What are your thoughts?
Hi, everybody. I'm wondering if it would be helpful to maybe take some time to read what's out there and other resources, and maybe we can come to the next meeting with our own definitions, and then we could sort of use those to formulate the work of compiling like a comprehensive definition and coming to consensus. Maybe post them to the Moodle in advance so we can read each other's and work through it that way.
I think it's a great idea. That makes total sense. What do other people think? Does that seem to make sense?
Yeah.
I agree. I think that it's a good idea to do that.
Now you're talking about reviewing reviewing it at the next meeting next week?
I think, if I'm understanding what the suggestion is we would, well, two things. One, I definitely want to have a conversation if we need to further about whether or not moving into digital literacy versus technology literacy makes sense, especially with people that weren't on the call last time. And then the second part of that is producing a definition for our committee about what we're talking about, what digital literacy is, and in the what we would do is look at some of these documents that are compiled, add anything that other people would like to add that are really important to look at, and come to our next meeting ready to define it for ourselves based on these resources. Does that?
Yeah.
Mary Ann?
Okay. Yeah, I'm just keeping in mind the fact that the conference is 2 weeks from tomorrow. So I'm just hoping we can.
And that makes me a little nervous, and I think
yeah.
Still, I think maybe even going back to number 2, without, you know, sort of clear expectations or, I guess, parameters for what we're presenting at that meeting, I'm not 100% clear on what they'll expect. And so if we could go in with, you know, we'd like to change the committee name, this is what our definition of digital literacy is, and whether or not we're, you know, reinventing or inventing something new, like, could those 3 things be enough of a presentation or recommendation, or would it need to be more than that?
Well, I'm thinking that you would also want to say whether you thought the outcome or the final product, if you thought it should be a framework, some form of guidance, or actual standards.
Right, and that's absolutely. So that's part of the third thing that I was suggesting. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think if people spend a little bit more time going through what Iste has to offer, as well as looking at like the Massachusetts state standards, it might help us come to both a definition as well as a direction. I'm going to throw up in the chat a link to Iste's essential conditions in their curriculum framework, which could also be used as a definition, in a sense, for digital literacy.
Awesome.
You know, with the OLAC paper that I talked about last week, we struggled a lot with their definition of online learning. Mm-hmm. And in my world, I'm like, it's digital literacy. You know, to not, you know, add new words out there that represent the same type of thing. But maybe this will sort of assist us in, you know, defining our own or going with something that's already out there.
Absolutely. And I should clarify, when I'm thinking of like defining our own, especially in terms of like digital literacy, you know, coming up with our own definition, I'm definitely not suggesting we create something new, but just that we take, you know, we sort of create an informed definition that draws on the things that we really believe to be the best definition of digital literacy. So that's great, Ben. I'm going to add that to the list of things for sort of our homework for this time. Are there other documents or things that we should pay attention to in addition to the ones that we looked at for today? Oh, or sorry, in addition to the ones that I've listed? So I have my little...
Through the American Library Association, they have a task force on digital literacy, so I don't have the resources handy, but I'll find them and then post the links either in the minutes or in the chat if I can find them quickly. That might be another place just to consider.
Awesome. Okay. And are there any disagreements while we're brainstorming materials about the digital versus technology?
Seems like everybody agreed last time, pretty much.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that everybody who was
here,
part of the conversation.
What was that question again, Kristen?
Sorry, Natalia. So the question is, last time we had talked about changing the name of the committee from technology literacy to digital literacy and really focusing on that as a concept as opposed to technology literacy. We felt that technology literacy was a little bit more limited than digital literacy. So right. That's what I'm just sort of making sure that that question is settled for us.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I think that the group represents how digital literacy is spread across teaching and learning of all content areas, as opposed to like the CIS certification. You know, if they define that to go down to the elementary level, or if they just keep it middle school, high school, you know, it's a different set of I'm losing my thoughts on how I want to point this in a good direction, but skill sets almost.
Yeah.
So, you know, is maybe another guiding document in a real weird, strange way that might be beneficial is to look at the next gen, you know, standards to see how they sort of already embed some of the stuff that we're going to talk about with digital literacy.
So NextGen was one of the documents we were supposed to look at for today, right, with the ELA standards. Maybe that's just a perfect segue into the next part of our agenda to really think about, you know, are we going to use one of these frameworks that already exist or create something new? And my challenge, Ben, with looking at the NextGen standards was if we're just looking at ELA, then that places a lot of pressure on literacy teachers to incorporate digital literacy in all that they do, and then sort of, for lack of a better analogy, you know, allows content area teachers to sort of point the finger at ELA, you know, for not having taught those skills. And then if we take on all of the next-gen standards, that seems like a huge task that may be beyond the scope of what we can accomplish as a committee. So I do have some questions about how we might go about mapping something if we do use what already exists.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, just looking at like the crosswalks this past week in preparation for this meeting, you know, a lot of the things that fall underneath like the Iste global standards are really in there. You know, they're spread out through, you know, creating presentations and, you know, the writing standards or the reading, you know, reading through multiple modes.
Right. What a fun but messy task we have ahead of us, right? It's,
oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
Scary. Like this is where we landed. I mean, also acknowledging that so much of this is changing, right? A lot of it, I mean, I think that will have to be part of our conversation and recommendations is that, you know, this is not static. As things become more automated, you know, the necessity for, or the definition of what is required of digital literacy teaching will change, you know, as Web 3.0 sort of takes over more and more. So let's talk about that a little bit. What do folks think about trying to take something that already exists and make it work for the state of New York? And now I'm asking people to comment on and think about some of the documents that you looked at that were linked in the homework section of the minutes. And if you didn't have a chance, that would be posted under agendas and minutes. The minutes from May 2nd document is what I'm referring to now, okay? Just to clarify, in case that's at all confusing, our homework for last time was to think through a bunch of these linked documents to sort of get a sense for whether or not we would want to use something that already exists as we're building some sort of framework or guideline for New York State, or would we want to invent something new?
Hi, this is Nicole again. As I was looking at the different documents that were shared, it seemed to me that it makes a lot of sense to use Iste as the backbone for some of this work and possibly maybe, you know, provide some samples for school districts to look at and then allow for flexibility how schools might take that on. I don't think that we would want to go as far as maybe the Gilderland scope and sequence, just because I think that the usefulness of those documents comes from when they're homegrown and they're like a living document that schools are looking at. I don't know if it would be useful for us to take on that level of work. I really liked the competencies document and I feel like that really mirrored the Iste standards across the board. So maybe it might be something where we look at New York State specific competencies, but I wouldn't go much farther than like a very basic framework that schools can then take and run with from there, at least from my perspective.
When you're talking about the competencies, do you mean the TETCs, like the teacher competencies?
Yeah, those, I really like those a lot.
Or general.
Mm-hmm.
What do other people think? That's really helpful feedback.
I agree with that too. I thought the teacher competencies, that was spot on.
And I like this idea of what's homegrown. You know, I think so often, I know as a teacher educator, I'm frustrated by that, by the you know, when students sort of get packaged curricula, right? And we're not talking about that specifically, but when things don't come sort of from the classroom outward, I like the idea of leaving some room there for home, you know, for schools to figure out how this makes sense for their ecosystem, for lack of a better word.
I agree too.
And just to add one more thing to that, while other people think about, you know, disagreements, concerns, agreements, the idea of, I think, competencies allows for some flexibility, right, some nimbleness over time. Yeah, because you know, we know that 5 years from now we'll have new standards, right? And they'll probably be very similar to the ones that exist, but will be repackaged in some way. Are there any other thoughts on which direction to go, how specific to get? Not everyone at once, okay, guys? I'm teasing. So if there aren't other concerns necessarily about this, if we feel in agreement about potentially creating some sort of framework that perhaps speaks to or follows from the Iste standards, I kind of feel like we need to develop our own crosswalk or like some sort of tool where we can actually assess and evaluate each of these resources. Does that sound like maybe a next step for our research? And so I'm thinking like some sort of, you know, tool where we have in the first column, like these are the documents that we've, you know, decided to look at, and then across the top with like different things that they do or do not do, and then we can begin to think about like what elements of each of those documents do we want to emulate, which ones do we think are extraneous. How would we go about doing such a thing? Any thoughts?
Could I just ask that who's ever typing could mute themselves? That's kind of distracting for me anyway.
Sorry, it's probably me.
Thanks.
No worries. Okay, so I did hear that there was, I think, a comment to perhaps not go into as deep detail as the Gilderlin scope and sequence, which is just phenomenal and so detailed and really, I mean, interesting. I'm curious to see what that looks like on the ground. There were some comments to look into the Iste essential conditions that Ben linked in the chat. Why don't we take a look at that document for a second? Does everybody mind taking a minute to actually look at the link that Ben shared?
The one in the chat?
Yeah, so the essential conditions for a curriculum framework. Let's take a look at that. It's very brief. Oh, thanks, Mary.
So just reading this, I remember that we used this when we created our Guild 1 scope and sequence because we intentionally put in there when we thought it was the right time to introduce the skills to the students. So in that document, that's why there's a key there, like I for introduce, you know, and things like that, so that it goes across all the grade levels. But I agree that, you know, coming from us representing the state, probably we need to be a little more general. And I agree with the comment of, I think it was Nicole that said that, you know, it should be something that each district can, you know, build from, like homegrown, like she said, you know.
I really agree with that.
We have 4 minutes left on this topic. Just keeping doing my job here.
I think we've like blown through the agenda already, so we're already on the last thing. So I appreciate that so much, Natalia.
Yep.
We're definitely doing fine on time. Well, we have much to do. I'm like, the pressure is on.
Yeah.
So something that struck me in this document is two things, and related to what Natalia was just saying, but a curriculum framework is needed to pair defined content standards with digital curriculum resources that are aligned to the content learning goals, right? So the framework, I feel, and it then goes on to say that it needs to address real-world skills. There need to be opportunities to learn the right skills at the right time for the right reasons, and then to meet specific learning objectives. So this is no tiny task, right? And in a way, we need to acknowledge that this is all a moving target, right? It's something that I think if we tie something specifically to skills, come a year from now, the language may need to change, right? So really what we're thinking about is, if we're thinking in terms of competencies, I'm really repeating what people have already said, reinforcing that I think going with the competencies makes sense.
I think something that that brought my attention was where it says technology is all too often applied as an add-on to existing curriculum. And I was thinking of when students are learning research skills, some of the library standards are not standards that you teach in isolation, but you have to teach with other classes. So anything that we do in the library, we can teach either in ELA, we can teach in science, we can teach in social studies. So I think as we develop this framework, we kind of have to think about the frameworks in the same way, where you can implement them in any subject, so that they're not just add-ons, but kind of like an underlying skills that can be applied in any subject. So,
Mary Ann, I have logistics question. Could I, for our purposes of our conversation now, because I really like to use the time that we have allocated, is it okay for me to make a Google Doc where we can brainstorm together and then shut it down and turn it into something we'll upload on the Moodle after the meeting so that we can have a collaborative conversation in a document right now? Is that possible?
Well, my understanding is that we're not supposed to do anything related to things that are going on in state ed and Google Docs.
Okay.
And correct me if you think I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. Yeah, so if you put stuff in there in Google Docs that's state ed related information, they frown on that. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so how can I get something on the screen that we can,
We'll have access to.
That's what you were trying to do earlier, right? Or maybe could you or John, oh, you're doing something. Like I see there's a notes thing.
I can do a whiteboard where you can type text. Is that what you were thinking about doing?
Yeah, so that we can sort of have our brainstorming in the same place and everybody can see it.
Yeah, let me just,
as we're chatting.
Let me see what I can do here.
You could make her open up Word, share.
And then share your screen. Yeah, let me just see if I can do this. Why am I not allowed to look? I'm trying to assign her privileges. But.
What's the notes document? Is that like what is the notes option?
Maybe assign privileges. Is that it?
No, that's not it. We're trying to figure out a way to give you the presenter thing so you could.
Gotcha.
Because if you were the presenter, you could actually, go into Word and work in Word and show your screen, or you could use whiteboard right on WebEx. But
right. Oh, to be on the technology committee and have it not quite worked, right?
Let's see. Try it. I think we're gonna. Yep. Is it grayed out? No.
That's the host, right?
To presenter.
Oh,
okay. So now you should show up as presenting. And then if you want to work on the whiteboard, do you see the tools on the whiteboard, or you can share your screen and go into Word.
Can everybody see that I just typed something on the whiteboard, or no?
No.
Did you type something using the text feature?
I did. It says, I said, can everyone
see
Did you
hit enter?
I did.
All right. Then click on the, there you go. Now we can see.
It was delayed.
Oh.
You just saw it and then it went away. Can everyone see this? I see that.
I can see it now, Kirsten.
Okay. Can you see me typing?
No.
I think it's delayed.
It's delayed. You have to hit, I think you have to hit enter or move on to another line or something. There.
No, it's gone.
It comes and goes for some reason.
Can you guys enable the notes field?
Yeah. Good idea.
We clicked anyone can share, but I'm not seeing.
Oh, this is too funny. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm not well-versed in WebEx.
That's why we need digital literacy standards.
Good. Touche. Too funny.
No, I don't see anywhere.
Oh my Lord. Okay.
They were asking if everybody could take notes, but I think that's in the setup of the meeting.
I didn't know you could take notes.
Yeah, you can set it up when you set up the meeting to allow that to be assigned privileges. But now that's grayed out. Can you click on assign privileges under participant, Kirsten? Under participant, up at the top under the participant, way up at the top it says.
She might have
maybe
a
you
different
don't
view
have it
because she's not the host.
Okay.
I can manage my panels, but that's about it.
Don't see anything that allows you to assign privileges?
No, unfortunately.
No, not the presenter.
Okay, so note to self, we will enable the notes feature next time. If we can imagine together, we could actually do this in the chat.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to initiate a chat.
I have a quick question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Would it be okay to do, like, I know that Wikispaces is actually closing down in July, but is that okay to use? Because that's kind of like a living document as well. I know it's not Google.
I have no idea. I have no idea if that would be all right or not. I'd have to check. I couldn't say yes or no.
If it's stated it's also using Word and Office. I'm not sure if you guys have Office 365, but if you do, then it essentially is the same as Google. That you can create a document within Office 365 and share the link, and then we could collaborate.
That is a good point. I can do that right now. Let's see if it works.
But I don't know if if they're reluctant to use a cloud-based service, or if it's just they're reluctant to use Google.
Well, that Google restriction has to do with Google not being willing to go along with NICE data privacy rules. I think it's specific to Google. I don't know. I mean, we have Office 365 that we use, so my guess would be
just Google.
Got it.
I don't know.
All right, let's see if this will work magically. I have much faith. Fingers crossed.
And you can share your screen? Is that what you're going to do?
No, I just added something in. I could try to do that. I just added something in the chat.
Oh, SharePoint.
Oh, you got it in SharePoint. Okay.
Oh, they have their own SharePoint.
Does that work for everybody? Or, oh, it looks like there's people there. Yay! Great. Okay, so way to be proactive, right? Here we go. So what we were talking about doing is taking the things we looked at for today and our various knowledges that we have across the many of us on the call to begin to think about what would be like the competency categories or the whatever we're going to call this. What would be some of the things, right, that we would want to exist? And this is going to be extremely messy, but I think we should just like throw out, what are some of the whether we end up calling them competencies or skills or whatever. Let's start there. So I'm going to add I'm going to delete this. What are skills, competencies, themes that we want students to know for DL? So apologies for the clunky question, but is what I'm asking clear? All right, let's spend a couple minutes just throwing some things out here. Anybody could throw anything out.
Are we supposed to see something there? I see crosswalk, brainstorm for DL framework /competencies, but that's all I see.
And so it should update or refresh periodically. I just added one more thing that is a question. And the question is, what are the skills /competencies /themes that we want students to know for digital literacy? So this would be like the, I'm sorry?
Just had to quick edit in browser to see what you were typing, that's all.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. And if anybody's having technical difficulties with that, let us know, and I could try to share my screen instead if that's easier. Okay, so many windows. I'm sure you're all experiencing the same thing at the moment. So not students, but we want students and teachers, right? We can sort of tease that out later. It's very messy, but awesome already. Keep going.
Yeah, I really like that nested terms comment. I like that.
Yep, agreed.
Oh, so you could even type it if you want.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just watching this with great fascination.
I'm enjoying this very much.
All we needed was the space to work together.
Right? Yeah, this is really more productive. It's great.
I don't know. Serious. I'm in a webinar. Sorry.
Say again?
Oh, nothing. My coworker thought I was talking to him. Just I have my headphones on, so nobody knows I'm in a webinar.
Oh, whoever's doing these subheadings is very smart. That's helpful to sort of organize it a little bit more.
Now, Kirsten, you'll be able to say, send us all this final document.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and post it to the Moodle. That'll be great.
Sure. So Nicole is taking minutes today, and I'll make sure to sort of put everything together in one place.
Okay, great. Yeah, that'll be great. The Moodle just needs to get sort of reorganized a little bit, I think.
I agree.
Easier to find it. Well, it takes a while to get used to that environment. And I did post the recording for everybody, so everybody knows the WebEx recording of the first meeting is there. So if you missed the first meeting, you can go there and listen to it.
Thank you.
We'll do that each week. Now, the recording will not show all of this because, Kirsten, you would have to be showing your screen. You would have to be sharing your screen in order for this to be recorded in the WebEx.
All right, so we'll keep that in mind for next time. I'll figure out how to share my screen.
Yeah, yeah.
I could do that right now, right?
Yeah, if you find it up on the top there and you can share your screen, then that's what everybody will see. Yeah, there it is.
Screen. Now you can all see the madness of my desktop.
Yes. You can see that, and that'll be recorded in the recording. The document will show, right?
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, this is great information. Some of it I don't even know what it means.
Well, I think that's part of, that's part of what really excites me about this particular committee is that we're so close to, across these many constituencies, being able to talk about the same things, but calling them very different things. So I think part of our work will be collapsing some of that, that's different across different content or different spaces.
Yeah, I think there's a real good mix of people on this committee. Really good.
If I can add it.
I added, even though it doesn't really sort of make sense maybe to this. I really like the piece from the Common Core where they defined students who are college and career ready and what type of skills that they would have. And a lot of that really is digital literacy, and again, with the way that the Iste standards are listed there, they do incorporate a lot of, internet searching, digital citizenship, digital publishing, that's all, under the framework of what a digital citizen is, or I'm not one that really goes too granular on things because, technology changes so rapidly. And I think that if we really wanted to be truly successful for all of our core areas, we want to make sure that they're terms and areas that are achievable by them.
I think that's really right, Ben. And I'm looking, you can probably see that I'm doing this on my screen, but I'm just scrolling through the Next Gen ELA standards, and part of me feels like if we try to tie this framework to the Next Gen standards, we're going to end up defining standards. We're going to end up writing standards, I feel like, which it sounds like is not something we want to necessarily do. What do you all think about that? Am I wrong about that?
So we're writing a framework and not competencies and not standards, right?
I think that's sort of the direction we are headed in at the moment, but it's certainly not set in stone.
I think a framework is easier to get everybody actively engaged in, how they can use technology to enhance instruction.
I think we might get more buy-in as well, and it's like you said earlier, it might be easier for districts to adjust.
And that's totally not to say, and I definitely want to point this out, that, when you get down to those pieces of instruction of how do you use a mouse, when should we introduce spreadsheets, and how can that be successful? That's really, in my opinion, if we really want to focus on the best use of time, let the teacher decide when they want to introduce a spreadsheet. Because, we used to we had this whole, matrix of when to do each thing. And we would introduce spreadsheets in like 3rd grade, but they would never use it again until 7th or 8th grade. So it didn't fit the timing. But when you look at it from a bigger picture, obviously if a 3rd grade teacher was going to do a lesson, and they're going to have to know, what do my students know and where do I have to begin with them if they're going to introduce spreadsheets or databases.
Yeah, I really agree with that.
Kirsten, I just wanted to respond to your point about writing standards and linking in with the standards and how that might become quickly an untenable process. I'm wondering if maybe the competencies might work well if we think about them almost in the way that the ELA practices operate and how each standard area has practices. Maybe there might be a place for thinking about technology or digital literacy practices, and then that way they're sort of overarching and general enough, but they drive down at those essential pieces of what that might look like for a district. I don't think that's different than competencies. It just might be a different way of structuring it or creating an alignment there so that it does feel like it's in line with other content areas, but it's not something that becomes way beyond what this committee would have the capacity to do, at least at this point.
And that's in, going back to your earlier point, in some way, that's what the TETSIs do, right? Like these teaching competencies have the little expandable, here's some ideas for what that would look like. And so in that way, we could link things to content areas or the standards by suggestion, but not as a mandate.
Right, yeah.
I think that's actually a great suggestion. And I started on the bottom of this collaborative document, just pulling some of those from the practices of what, in terms of ELA. So monitoring comprehension, making connections, doing close reading, utilizing digital tools for research. I mean, they're sort of duh, right? Of course we're doing those things. But I think that will be really important until digital is just more commonly known. What are we talking about, right? I think in 10 to 20 years, we'll be we don't even need digital literacy competencies, right? It's what we do. We have paperless classrooms, so interesting.
It's funny that you say that because as you go through the ELA Next Gen, there is nothing to instruct people how to, or point people in the direction of, this is a pencil, this is a piece of paper, this is how you know what I mean?
That's right. And it's so funny. I wonder if I should look more closely at the Next Gen ELA, early childhood. But, concepts about print is a thing that we do in early childhood, right? As children are learning how to read, see that they know how to hold a book, right? That they know that you go from left to right. I wonder if there's got to be similar assessments for reading a website, right? But that is really interesting, then, that's not.
Well, they do point out, in both formats in the ELA, both digital as well as, paper format, as well as, creating presentations, different types of, how you write and what tools you're using to write.
Right. Awesome. Okay, so how can we, what's next? Who wants to volunteer to take this forward? Any revolutionary thoughts about how to take this amazing brainstorm and make it productive in our last half hour to bring us forward to beginning to perhaps build this framework of competencies?
Well, I think essentially we also need to make the distinction of, like you mentioned earlier, some early, for our littlest learners and for our middle school and high school students. And, because one of the things that you mentioned, Ben, was Common Core career and readiness. And so if we're going to, what's the umbrella that we're going to be presenting this with, I guess? Are we looking at, for example, middle school and high school to have an umbrella that encompasses the basic digital skills for jobs that are out there? You know what I mean? It's when I started jotting down these skills, I typed in digital skills. I started thinking in my head, this is what I was thinking. This is what kids will need to know when they go out into the workforce. Because right now, for example, we're working together and we need to know, we kind of know how to use, Word online, how to format a file, how to organize our files and things like that. So I was thinking in my head that those skills, we need to make a differentiate, I guess, between our early childhood and middle school, high school. I don't know if we can do for everybody the same thing. I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly.
You really are. I'm going to add another question.
I don't feel it right now.
So that's such a brilliant question, Natalia, because, you know, as I'm thinking, we probably all have slightly different experiences with this, but, you know, there are 12th grade classrooms where students in the state right now are not, you know, part of what the Smart Schools Bond Act is trying to do is make sure that every classroom is wired, right? Mm-hmm. But the reality is that we're not there yet, and there are certainly some classrooms in schools where children will get through school at this point without developing significant digital skills. And so whereas some will be coming into kindergarten now, right, and learning, along with learning how to read, how to utilize tablets, how to utilize laptops. So that is a good question. Is this something that we can actually differentiate according to grade level or what's developmentally appropriate? And that brings in the question of, like, maybe we should look at that research too. Like, what are some of the researchers saying around the developmental appropriateness of utilizing digital technology in the classroom? Mm-hmm. Does anybody know about that research? I definitely don't, but like
I don't know a lot, but I know that when we try to use the keyboarding for our district, you know, they have, you know, those companies will sell you, you know, a curriculum for kindergarten, and if they could sell you a curriculum for 2-year-olds, right? But our OTs were very emphatic about, you know, their little fingers are not quite there developed, they, you know, the eye-hand coordination thing, so they made a lot of good points when we started the typing program, and they helped us evaluate the different vendors that were out there. So their recommendation was important, so maybe we should look into that as well.
I think that's really great. I'm not actually as familiar with the literature, although I feel like I should be as far as early childhood goes. So much of it has been up to the individual teacher at this point, or the school district and the initiative. I feel like as a mother of a 3-year-old, I'm always starting a mommy war on Facebook with like asking things like, what apps do you use with your toddlers? And people are like, my child hasn't seen a screen, you know, in 9 years, and I'm sort of like, that's not realistic anymore. So.
Well, and also, you know, you have to think about computer-based testing. You know, we just finished our math round of computer-based testing, and most of these kids are having a hard time dragging objects, specifically with a mouse pad, for example. So teaching them how to park one finger on the mouse pad, press down, and then move the other to drag the object around. Those are like the little skills that, you know, you got to teach the little ones. So.
Right. And of course, some of that depends on the machinery, right, on the hardware.
Right, yeah.
That you're using. Well, this is not a simple task that we have, that's for sure.
Yes. So I guess that brings about the mechanics of using the hardware, I guess.
Yeah. So I feel like that might be a necessary area for us to gather some more research on too, before we can answer that question that's really important, I think, that you raised, Natalia, about how do we think about this from different levels, right? And we could choose to separate it as Common Core or Next Gen have, you know, sort of K2, upper elementary, and then 6 to 12, although I feel like lumping 6 to 12 in together is maybe not completely fair.
Mm-hmm. I had a question. This is Mary Ann.
Sure.
As you were talking before about framework versus standards and competencies versus digital literacy practices and things like that, I was thinking, how does all that relate to the, you know, the overall perspective of local control versus state standards? Like, there's always that balance, and I think that's part of what you're getting at without actually putting it that way. Is that true?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's part of, you know, I'm thinking about the SAMR model, and I don't know if I've shared this already with this committee, but I've chatted with some superintendents, and it's not just superintendents, but, you know, folks across the spectrum, depending on, you know, a variety of different roles, about the SAMR model. And then sort of hearing from teachers or from leaders that the SAMR model has been utilized in sort of an evaluative way. And if folks aren't, does everybody know about the SAMR model?
Yes.
So if you're not always in R, like you're not always doing technology right, and the reality is that some things don't require a digital thing, right? For some kids, it's not the best way of teaching a concept. So I think there's a lot of questions about that too. How often does technology need to be used in the classroom? Should it always be? Should we always be redefining and transforming and innovating in education, or is it okay to not always be doing that? And I think that's part of the tension we're getting at too.
Well, that's sort of like you're saying, we don't want to necessarily use technology for technology's sake, just
right.
Yeah, just to say we're using technology.
Thanks, Marianne, for adding yet another tension.
I think going back to the SAMR model, you know, Dr. Puentedura, I think his intention behind it was probably to guide teachers in how to best integrate technology in the classroom when technology integration was a very new concept. I agree that things need to be redefined and whatnot and modified, but there's a progress for everything, and there's an initial stage for everything. So, you know, yes, we need to strive to move from replacing pen and paper with a Word document, right? Because, you know, replacing the worksheet with a same worksheet online, I agree with that, but I also believe, like you said, Kirsten, that, you know, there's a time for everything, and not every child learns. That's probably not the best for every single child.
Which makes it harder in a way then to tie certain things, right, to grade level bands, but I think ultimately we'll need to head in that direction. So somebody just linked the performance indicators and outcomes for California ICT Digital Literacy Assessments and Curriculum Framework. Just scrolling through that right now. It looks interesting.
I just thought it was really interesting. I scrolled down and they have different indicators per grade level. And it's nice because it groups it by age and then also by grade. But I mean, I'm just thinking in the lens of like special education students or English language learners, they might not always fall in that age range or category, but it still gives us like just something maybe to look at for each grade level.
That is helpful. And as I'm scrolling through on page, 11, I like this sort of, and this in some ways speaks to the Gilderland framework as well, or the scope and sequence rather, but having these like emerging, applying, infusing, transforming, like these sort of different levels of, you know, you're introducing, practicing, or mastering, right, something. I think that that's helpful as a guide, right, introducing the idea of keyboarding or mouse, whatever, you know, mouse technology, if you will, in like kindergarten, and that should be mastered by third grade or however. I think having some sort of guidelines makes sense. I agree with that, Sarah.
And on page 3, too, it also goes through the basic elements of digital literacy, so it's nice because it has definitions of competencies just for those that might not be, you know, aware of what is, what digital literacy really is. So kind of something to think about, I guess.
Yeah, it's very basic, and it's, I mean, really tied to Iste, right? Published.
Well, it has, yeah, the nets are in there, listed off.
So it must be older, right?
Yeah, I was actually looking for the nets because the nets were a little bit more granular. This is from 2008.
Oh, interesting. Dated. Huh. Am I missing the grade level? I must have missed the grade level thing as I'm scrolling through here. Anyway, that's a great thing to take another look at. Oh, here we go. Pre-K to 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 to 12. That's certainly a tension we'll have to figure out, right? I think that there are critiques on both sides of doing grade level bands versus just sort of general, this is what children should learn in school. We'll definitely have to think about that. So, okay, as we come up on the last 15 minutes of our call, I think that we need to, I want to look at the doodle poll and see if we can choose a date for our next meeting. Has everybody on the call been able to weigh in?
I missed that email.
I can link here, I'll link this in the chat. Back to the, this is too funny. Here it is. Nope. How do I get back to my chat? Is it here? No. Uh-oh. Are you all enjoying this?
You got to stop sharing your screen, I think, Kirsten.
That is too funny. All right, chat. Here we go. There is a link to the doodle poll. It looks like Tuesday the 15th at 3 is maybe the best option.
That's for your meeting, the third meeting.
That would be the third meeting. And either the 21st or 22nd as a possible fourth meeting if we need it. And I'll just give a second to anybody that wants to weigh in.
Yeah, we've got, I think on the 21st at 3 is the online learning subcommittee. That's why I didn't check that one.
Gotcha. Okay, so we probably, it looks like realistically we'll meet one more time, I think, before the 24th. We can certainly do some stuff online, but it might be hard to get everybody on another call in addition.
Yeah, if you do the 15th at 3, it looks like somebody else will have to take notes because Nicole's not available.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We can rotate that so that you don't always have to be burdened with that. We can share that role. So, all right. So it looks like Tuesday the 15th. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this one more time. I'm sorry about that, Nicole. It looks like the majority is available on the 15th at 3. So this is what I'm thinking. I'm just going to go back to this document again for a second. I'm thinking that we need some sort of document that summarizes some of this, because there is some overlapping information right in our little bulleted lists here, and begins to make sense of organizing it. And then that should be what helps guide our conversation, I think, on the 15th, to figure out where we want to expand and where we want to narrow down on these various, I guess we can call them competencies for now, although that term may shift. So what I'll do before our next meeting is create some sort of like framework to help guide our conversation, or matrix, I guess. And between now and then, we have 2 tasks. One is to take another look at the digital literacy definitions, right? And I'll link all of this and summarize it in the minutes, the final version of the minutes. And then the second thing would be to come to the meeting prepared to really get our hands dirty on fleshing out some of the areas that we think would be part of our framework in the state of New York. And I feel like, I hope this is okay, Marianne, but I feel like we're going to need to say to the folks that we're presenting to on the 24th that further research is needed in a couple of different areas before we really land in one place. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think they would expect, you know, a finished product. It's the beginnings of the whole conversation and just getting a general direction and seeing if, you know, how they react to that, so that, you know, we don't go up somewhere that they maybe are not in favor of. You know what I'm trying to say? That,
sure. Yeah,
that we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and that they're comfortable with the direction that the committee is leaning towards.
Oh, good. That makes a lot more sense than actually, you know, feeling like we have to come up with sort of a fully fleshed out framework and then have it potentially be something that was not in the direction of what the
Right. Yeah, we don't want to, go too far afield and then say, no, that's not, you know, we don't think that's a good idea or something. No, I think this is a good thing to do, is to talk to, you know, NYSED management at closer to the beginning of the process, you know, to make sure that it's going in a direction that can lead to something, you know, more permanent or more, you know, something that can get approved and move forward to the higher levels and actually take root.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my perspective anyway.
So that's great, Marianne. So how is everyone with those two goals? And I'll repeat them for our next meeting. So one, reviewing some materials on digital literacy and coming to some consensus about what our working definition of that will be going forward for the committee. And we agreed to sort of, you know, take in parts of things that we already know and not reinvent the wheel there, but maybe create our like NYSED, you know, patchwork definition, for lack of a better analogy. And then the second thing would be to, I'll develop some sort of tool that we can take to begin to map out or think about how, you know, what do we want our competencies framework to look like based on the various things that we brainstormed today. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Sounds good. And then you'll actually share this collaboration document so people can see it too who couldn't be here.
Oh, of course, yep.
I think that'll be good.
Sounds good. We have 10 minutes to spare. Is there anything else that we should talk about or anything else that we need to link to this awesome document that we created?
I'm adding a chunk on the bottom. If just for the purpose of, we've used a canned program here for a number of years called learning.com in their Easy Tech program, which I'm actually dumping this year just because I think our teachers and our students sort of grew out of a lot of it.
Yeah.
But there is some good information here on digital literacy. So at the very bottom, I put 12 essential digital literacy skills. I copied that from the page, and then there's a link there at the bottom. If you click on the link, it will take you to sort of like their working definition of digital literacy, and breaks it down into a couple areas that are not listed in the Iste. Well, they sort of are, but not really, in the Iste standards. So if we wanted something that was a little bit more granular, maybe this type of thing would be a nice addition to the other piece of what Iste has.
Awesome. I think that sounds great. I'll take a look at it as I'm making this matrix thing. How did I volunteer to do that? Okay, way too punchy at the end of this very long week, and it's only Wednesday, right? So the other question I have is, can we have any volunteers to look a little bit into some of these bold-faced questions above what Ben just added? So the idea of, you know, what's sort of developmentally appropriate? Begin gathering research in that area. Does anybody want to start that?
I can definitely look into that.
Okay.
Sarah. Sorry.
Awesome, Sarah. And Sarah, your last name starts with an F, right?
Yep, it's Farnand.
Okay, I'm going to put SF next to that.
Yep.
So this is everyone. And just adding some next steps to remind me when I'm summarizing the minutes, which Nicole, you and I can make our stuff meld. Awesome. All right, I think we have our work cut out for us. Was there anybody else that wanted to join Sarah in that endeavor? All right, we'll keep asking next time. All right, so our next meeting will be on May 15th at 3 p.m., it looks like.
Yep, and I'll set up the WebEx and send out the invitation.
You read my mind. Amazing. All right, well, we certainly have our work cut out for us. I am so excited about this conversation and really look forward to continuing it next week.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thanks to everybody. This was great.
Really productive conversation.
Thank you, everyone.